So in summary, questions remain. Was the Nakba the result of deliberate policy? The evidence clearly points in the direction of yes. However, there was never any official cabinet order to that effect. Was it then an understood mindset? Nevertheless, according to Pape and Khalidi, Plan Dalet was the master plan for the expulsion of the Palestinians. Benny Morris presents it more as a defensive gesture to secure the perimeter of the nascent Israeli state. Whatever the reason, the number of villages depopulated is staggering. Here is a list of those villages that were evacuated or destroyed. And here is a chart showing the numbers of villages affected by this war. Was then fear the primary motivator? Morris believes that Arab evacuees from towns and villages left largely because of Jewish attacks or fear of impending attack. Pictured here are members of Samson's Foxes, a commando group that evacuated Palestinian villages during the war. Yuri Avneri details his experiences both with Samson's Foxes and the Irgun in My Friend the Enemy. He writes, "As a member of Samson's Foxes, a commando unit mounted on jeeps, I entered dozens of Arab villages in the south of the country. Many of them had been abandoned by their inhabitants only a few minutes before. Ovens were still hot. In some houses food was still on the table. I became obsessed by the human tragedy of war. I would gather snapshots of the inhabitants which were left behind, like all other personal belongings. I still have some of them, photos of children, women, old men. Whenever I hear about the problem of the Palestinian refugees, these pictures come to mind. When I visited the refugee camps of Sabra and Shatila that day in July 1982, it crossed my mind that some of the inhabitants may have come from those villages, that some of the children whose snapshots I still keep are by now old refugees in the camps." That view is augmented by the perspective of the UN mediator brought in to address the conflict and make recommendations. According to him, the exodus of the Palestinian Arabs resulted from panic created by fighting in their communities, by rumors concerning real or alleged acts of terrorism or expulsion. Almost the whole of the Arab population fled or was expelled from the area under Jewish occupation. Count Bernadotte was assassinated for his perspective on how to handle the situation by the Stern Gang while in an escorted UN motorcade winding its way through Jerusalem. One thing seems clear. One critical event, the Deir Yassin massacre in early April, and the rumors that followed it, helped spread fear and panic amongst the Palestinians. So let's take a closer look at Deir Yassin. Alfred Lilienthal placed the responsibility for the Palestinian refugee problem squarely with the Zionist military forces, specifically the freedom fighters, which included the Stern Gang and the Menachem Begin-led Irgun, both of which were viewed as terrorist groups by the British. Here we see a note from Albert Einstein refusing a request to support these freedom fighters. But now, let's take a look at the situation from the perspective of an eyewitness. Here, from the memoirs of Jacques de Reynier of the International Red Cross, we begin to get a sense of the panic that was created by this massacre. Upon his arrival at the scene, he saw a young woman stab an elderly man and woman cowering in the doorstep of their hut. When he entered one of the first houses, he noted that everything had been ripped apart and torn upside down. There were bodies strewn about. They had done their cleaning up with guns and grenades and finished their work with knives, he writes. Anyone could see that. After rushing the wounded to the nearest hospital, he noted that the surviving women and children were stripped and paraded in 3 open trucks, their hands over their heads, up and down King George V Avenue, where they were spat on and even stoned. According to Lilienthal, this village had done nothing to provoke the attack. The village had on occasion actually collaborated with the Jewish Agency and was said by a Jewish newspaper to have actually driven out some Arab militants. It was the Muslim Sabbath when the attack was launched on the little village by the combined forces of the Irgun and the Stern Gang. What happened here struck fear in the hearts and minds of the existing Palestinian population. The issue of whether or not this was a conscious strategy is yours to decide. A question of interest, however, is this. Was this behavior exhibited elsewhere, or was it an isolated instance? Let's take a look. For more information on this issue, we'll turn to an interview that appeared in Haaretz on January 16, 2004 with Benny Morris. Morris has identified 24 massacres that occurred in the 1948 war. He notes that in some cases 4 or 5 people were executed, in others the numbers were 70, 80, 100, more. The worst cases are listed here. Add to those cases instances of arbitrary killing like the ones listed below. 2 old men are spotted walking in a field. They are shot. A woman is found in an abandoned village. She is shot. There are cases such as in the Hebron region in which a column entered the village with all guns blazing and killed anything that moved. Operation Hiram created 50,000 new refugees just hours before a UN ceasefire went into effect. This cleared the area for Israel that was marked by the UN for the new Arab state. This effort resulted in an unusually high concentration of executions of people against a wall or next to a well. Interestingly enough, Ben-Gurion silenced the matter by covering up for the officers who committed the massacres. Clearly, Benny's info has some shock value for Ari, who asks, "What you are telling me here is that in Operation Hiram there was a comprehensive and explicit expulsion order. Is that right?" Benny: "Yes, one of the revelations in the book is that on October 31st, 1948, the commander of the Northern Front, Moshe Carmel, issued an order in writing to his units to expedite the removal of the Arab population. Carmel took this action immediately after a visit by Ben-Gurion. There is no doubt in my mind that this order originated with Ben-Gurion." Again, Ari asks, almost in disbelief, "Are you saying that Ben-Gurion was personally responsible for a deliberate and systematic policy of mass expulsion?" Benny: From April 1948, Ben-Gurion is projecting a message of transfer. There is no explicit order of his in writing. There is no orderly comprehensive policy. But there is an atmosphere of transfer. The transfer idea is in the air. The entire leadership understands that this is the idea. The officer corps understands what is required of them. Under Ben-Gurion, a consensus of transfer is created. Ari asks, Ben-Gurion was a transferist? Benny: of course Ben-Gurion was a transferist. He understood that there could be no Jewish state with a large and hostile Arab minority in its midst. There would be no such state. It would not be able to exist. Ari: I don't hear you condemning him. Benny goes on to say Ben-Gurion was right. If he had not done what he did, a state would not have come into being. That has to be made clear. It is impossible to evade it. Without the uprooting of the Palestinians, a Jewish state would not have arisen here. Ari asks again, Benny Morris, for decades you have been researching the dark side of Zionism. You are an expert on the atrocities of 1948. In the end, do you in effect justify all this? Are you an advocate of the transfer of 1948? Benny responds, there is no justification for acts of rape. There is no justification for acts of massacre. Those are war crimes. But in certain conditions, expulsion is not a war crime. I don't think that the expulsions of 1948 were war crimes. You can't make an omelet without breaking eggs.